actually manage the completion of the project. Now, when we talk about managing the completion of a project, there's three things that are vital when you are executing a project. So what we look at is, are you able to complete the project on time, within budget, and according to specification? So that's the three most important parameters that you look at when you are actually completing a project. And that is basically how you would see whether a project is actually successful or not. So just a reminder of that, when you're completing a project, three most important things is, are you able to complete that project on time? Are you able to complete that project within budget and according to the specifications? So if you look at the project manager, their main role and responsibility is to ensure that they actually manage the completion of the entire project. So they will be involved from conceptual stage, that's the design. Remember, we said at the beginning, the client would appoint the professional team. The professional team is composed of your architects, your engineers. They will look at in terms of the design of the project itself. Thereafter, the next stage, once they've designed and they've packaged that project itself, the client will then go out on your tender stage. So your tender stage, what we're looking at is we're looking to then appoint a contractor or contractors to actually complete the project. Once the tendering stage is completed, a contractor is then appointed. The contractor is the one that actually does all of the work. So they ensure that the project is then completed on time, within budget, and according to these specifications. And then thereafter, once the project has been completed, there is a few more stages as follows. One of it is the handover stage, and then the last one is what we refer to as the commissioning stage. Now, depending on the nature of the project, that commissioning stage could be a hospital, a medical facility. So once that has actually gone into the process of where it can actually be utilized, that is your commission stage. And then far down the line, what you might also have is your decommissioning stage. All right, can we go to the next slide? Okay, other very important role players, and especially the young people out there, just look at these also as career opportunities as well. So we spoke about a whole lot of professionals that are going to be required. Some of the other areas that are not mentioned as much is things like your safety officer, and this is a very crucial role. Once again, the SACP CMP is also here. If you get a chance, go and visit their stall. They'll talk about the professional registration of the various health and safety categories. There's three of them, so you can actually just find out more about it and how you can actually get registered and what are the minimum requirements as well. Another area that they also cover is that of your construction managers. Now, construction managers basically are the ones that oversee the construction processes uh, from the planning to the completion, ensuring that the project meets all the requirements. Now, once again, those requirements, completing your project on time, within budget, according to specification. And then lastly, and probably one of the most important, is the construction companies. So that's going to be you. The SMMEs that are sitting in this room, remember, we can do all of the other stages, but nothing's going to actually happen unless we do the construction phase. So the contractors are the ones that are actually responsible for providing the construction services and often acting as a general contractor. And in many cases, you will manage more than one project as well. When you're starting off, you're probably going to be looking at one project at a time. And then as you get bigger and you have more capacity, you'll be able to manage multiple projects. So here again, you can see that nothing is going to actually be built in terms of infrastructure. There won't be any service delivery unless we have competent contractors. Okay, next slide. Okay, so before I get on to the fundamentals of a construction business, I just want to see, are there any questions? No questions. There's a hand there. Sorry, can we get a roving mic? So maybe if you can just maybe introduce yourself first.
Good morning, everyone, or good day in that case. My name is Dixon Pugula. Uh, when you were just starting with all the professionals involved, we didn't say anything about maybe the soil classification, just your geotech. I don't know if you can just unpack on that particular section.
So sorry, I didn't get that. Can you just repeat, please?
I didn't hear you mention anything about the soil classification when you were mentioning the professionals involved in the project.
Sorry, what classification?
Geotechnical engineering.
Oh, okay. All right. So I think that's an important one that you're actually highlighting. So when I spoke about engineering, I just mentioned engineering. I didn't go into the various categories. Now that is one of the categories when you come. Well, geotechnical is an area as well. You also would get in terms of your engineering itself. Remember, you've got a multiple in term disciplines. So you've got your mechanical, you got your electrical, you got your civil, and so on. So yeah, what I actually had presented there wasn't an exhaustive list of all of the professionals in the industry, because even things like your national scientists as well, they are professionals that are within the industry and they are required as well, especially when you're doing your feasibility and your design and so on. So there are more categories in terms of the professionals itself. Thanks. All right. If we can go back to the slides. So in terms of the fundamentals of a construction business, why do you actually get into business? So I think this is one of the most important things you have to ask yourself is, why am I getting myself into business? One. And in terms of me as a business, what do I need to actually do to be able to call myself successful itself? So the business world comprises of many enterprises that are selling goods, that is products. People probably need those products. That's why you want to get into that. There's a market for it. And then there's also those that offer services. And as I mentioned, when it comes to the construction industry, what you're going to be providing is a combination of goods and services to a client through a contract that is either agreed verbally or is committed in writing. Now, when I say agreed verbally, this is just the initial stage where you may agree in terms of works that need to be completed, but you need to ensure that is then translated into writing in terms of what you have committed. So important is you need to ensure that you are going to be financially sustainable as a business. So you must ensure that you invoice or you bill your client more than the total of the monies that are expended. So what does that mean? So when you're running a business, you need to ensure that whatever services and goods that you are providing is going to actually translate into a profit for you. Now, you need to also ensure that when you're looking at the cost of that services that you're going to be rendering or the products that you're going to be providing, it's not just the cost of those projects. You have to look at some things called your overheads. Now, overheads are going to be things like, firstly, you're going to be using a telephone or your cell phone, access to internet. You need to think about transport. You need to think about where your offices are going to be. You're going to be paying rent. So you need to take all of those things into account and say, when I am running a project, with all of my overheads, with the cost of the materials that I'm going to be using, and the cost of my services. And this is important because many people don't cost in their time, and they say time is money. So you need to ensure that you also calculate what's the cost of your time as well when you're looking at pricing for a project. Okay, so what ultimately you need to be able to achieve is you need to ensure that the income that you get is greater than your expenditure. And that will then translate into your business moving in the right direction. And as you're able to increase your profits, you become more and more successful. Can we go to the next slide? All right. So one of the areas that we're going to be looking at is joint ventures. Now, from time to time, you're going to find that contractors may form what we refer to as a joint venture. And they do this for a number of reasons. Sometimes you're going to be looking at the nature of the project, and you might find that the project is too large just for yourself to actually manage. So, what you would do is you would then get involved into a joint venture with other companies that can provide services or resources that support the project itself. So when the project requires certain skill sets and you may not have those skill sets yourself, what you can look at is getting into a joint venture with other companies that can actually provide those services. So if you look in a country like South Africa, what happens? The skills and expertise of emerging contractors can also be developed through your joint ventures. And what you would normally do is you'll joint venture with your established contractors or experienced companies, and they can also provide you with developmental support. Now, this is a key area that we actually look at when it comes to the development of SMMEs. And a little bit later, my colleagues from the CIDB will be talking about how joint ventures, when they actually included in the procurement process itself, it actually supports the development of your emerging contractors, especially those that are able to then joint venture with a larger contractor. You get the support and assistance in areas where you may be struggling or you may have a few challenges. Can we go on to the next slide? So, still on joint ventures, when you look at joint ventures, so they may operate as two very distinct or different ways. But in practice, what happens is you need to ensure that both these organizations are able to then provide some sort of benefit to each other to ensure that the project can actually be completed. So the members of a joint venture can actually pool their resources, and the contract is then executed by the joint venture with their pooled resources. But what is important when you're looking at getting involved into a joint venture, you need to ask yourself is, in terms of the work that needs to be completed and the obligations making up the contract, who's going to be responsible for what? What are the natures of the works? What are the capabilities? And what are the resources that are going to be required? And how are you going to actually split that? So each element, what you need to do is you need to then assign specific members of the joint venture who are going to be responsible for executing that under the joint venture itself. So if you're saying that I'm going to be doing a joint venture with another company, and for instance, we're going to be doing a simple renovation, you need to speak to them and say, okay, so I want to do the tiling part of it. I'm going to do the plumbing. Are you able to do the plastering? Are you able to do the painting? And ensure that they actually have the resources to come on board and complete that. So when you are selecting your joint ventures or you're looking at partnering with another contractor, you need to also see, is it going to benefit you? Maybe this is not the type of work that I want to do because maybe I just don't have good tilers at the moment, but I know my friend actually does have that. So let's joint venture with them and get them to support. And then you have to also look at the cost. Remember, when you're running a project, you need cash flow as well. And if you can't afford to maybe cover all of the materials and you know you can do a joint venture and somebody can then be able to cover certain aspects, it also lessens the burden on your side. You're able to complete the project, and that's the main part of it, that you be able to complete the project, but you must be able to make that profit as well. So you need to work with someone that you can rely on. Next slide. All right. So another area within the construction industry, and this is quite common, it's called subcontracting. So the practice of subcontracting portions of a construction works contract to others is well established in South Africa. And the reason for subcontracting, one of them could be to acquire specialist capabilities to perform certain works. So let's say that you are building a house and you've done the foundations, and so you've started to do the brickwork, but then you then need to get the electrical work done. And that's not an area where you actually have the resources or the expertise. So what you can do, you can subcontract that works. Alternatively, if you know that you're very good with the wet works, And if you have the skills and capability, you might want to then get into a subcontracting agreement with a bigger contractor to say, I can provide you with these services, I can complete these works, more than capable of it, I have the resources, I have the expertise. In that case, you will then be acting as a subcontractor. So you need to focus on what skill sets you actually do have. The other thing is it also helps to increase the contracting capacity of a contractor to satisfy a client's requirements or expectations relating to the engagement of small or your micro enterprises. Now, another thing is certain times you are also have certain constraints. You may have more than one project that you're busy with, and in terms of your capacity, you might then need support. Then you can also look at subcontracting certain works. Can we go to the next? So in terms of subcontracting itself, there's three main forms of your subcontracting. The first one, we refer to this as a domestic subcontractor. Now, the domestic subcontractor is a subcontractor that is appointed by the main contractor at his or her discretion, in which case the contractor is free to negotiate the prices and the terms of subcontracting. So what happens? The main contractor is appointed. The main contractor says, okay, so I want to subcontract some of the works. And so what they would do is they would say, this is the type of works I want to subcontract. And they may then get some pricing from subcontractors, say, these works, how much it's going to cost. And then based on that, they might then select them or then negotiate a rate with them to say, okay, so for the wet works, this is the rate that I want to be giving you. And then they would appoint that domestic subcontractor. So that is solely at the discretion of the main contractor. The next one is a nominated subcontractor. And your nominated subcontractor is someone who is nominated by the employer or the client. Are the screens off? Okay, I'm sure our technical guys are working on it. Okay. There's a suggestion we need to get an electrical contractor here. So we pay. Okay. Okay, but while we are working on the screen, so we are talking about the nominated subcontractor, and I said that that is a subcontractor that is selected by the employer, and that nominated subcontractor would then have to work with the main contractor. Now, some of the areas you might find that is maybe on a project where they also have to do certain security upgrades. And in that case, the client would then say that, you know, in terms of the security upgrades, because it's a sensitive area, I will then give you the names or the details of the subcontractor that you will then appoint to do those works. That is the case of your nominated subcontractor. I think, apologies, ladies and gentlemen, we'll just give it a few minutes to get the presentation back on. I think while we're waiting, maybe we can take questions. Any questions? There's a question there. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Ndebo. I just want to know on the point of subcontractors, what tips can you give the companies here today on how to engage with the bigger guys that get the main contracts? You know, for example, if I were to leave now, you know, what's the best way to engage with those companies? And then I can subcontract work for them. Just from your experience, what you can advise.
Okay. No, thanks for that. Are there any other questions? Okay. So I've also got Mr. Richard Rapiri in the room as well, who may want to add or respond to some of the questions. He's the Director for Procurement and Development. But in terms of your subcontracting, I think what you firstly need to identify is what are your strengths? What are you offering as a subcontractor? You need to have your company profile. In that company profile, you need to also show, in terms of projects that you've completed, what's your capacity, what's your expertise. And then you mean to actually be able to market that to your larger contractors. So you need to actually engage with them, take it to them. Sometimes what you might find is that the larger contracting entities actually have databases. So then you can register on their databases to say that, in terms of my specialization, let's just say that you're focusing on plumbing. What can you offer in terms of the plumbing? What's your capacity? What are some of the projects that you've completed? Do you have the licensing as well that is required? And in terms of that, you can then share that with the main contractors. The other thing is, what's also important is, once you start to build that relationship, you need to ensure that whatever works you have been contracted to do, you are able to actually complete those works. And you need to be able to complete it successfully. That helps to build relationships. Important is, you need to also understand the value of your work. And so often what happens is, because of the working dynamics where you've got a larger company, you feel that you are much smaller. And so what happens is, you just tend to take the rates that are given to you. If that doesn't translate into a profit for you, it's not worth being in that relationship. So you need to ensure you are able to work out the rates yourself, to say what it's going to cost you to actually complete those works. And you must then be able to negotiate as well. You turn, look, you want me to do curb laying over here, the cost is going to be so much per meter, and I can't do it any cheaper because I'm going to be running at a loss, unless there's some other area that you can negotiate in terms of the prices for me, maybe with some of the larger suppliers, where they can offer better payment terms. So you can pay within 60 days or 45 days, whatever the case is. So you need to also look at how you benefit from this relationship with the larger contractors. So it's not just a case of the work itself, but what are some of the other areas that you can actually benefit from? And then you can also talk about how it is going to be possible to get some sort of developmental support, especially in the areas that you're struggling with. You can always get that. So, Inati, is there a response? Richard, if you can please add.
Thanks. I think you have covered most of the right things that has to happen around how you market yourself to engage, these big contractors. And we also have to understand that these big contractors, as big as they are actually not doing the work themselves. In most cases, they are doing management on those contracts. And therefore, the subcontractors are the ones who are actually doing the construction work. So it's a good thing that the colleague raised here to say, how do I engage them? Because basically, that's what they need. They all work with subcontractors. Most of them, they do have their own internal subcontractors, which defeats the purpose of the industry in terms of whether the client has imposed subcontracting arrangement on them. So hence we are now working with the Public Procurement Act to introduce mandatory subcontracting, which the client must put into the tender documents, so that you can now have a nominated approach of subcontracting to make sure that all the emerging contractors are participating. So hence we are now even having regulations that we will cap, these big companies like, maybe let me mention few, Greenacre and all of those. They are actual management contracts. They are not contractors like yourselves. So they do have the internal subcontracting arrangement with companies that might not be even registered with CIDB. And as a result, so that is why we are then saying we will then be forcing subcontracting through public procurement, so that then they can subcontract within the ambit of the CIDB register. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Richard. Are we winning with the presentation? Okay, so this screen is actually blank here, so I'm unable to see. No, mine's not. Sure. Okay, guys, so I'm going to actually be coming down because I can't see the presentation from my side. But we are talking about selected your. We're talking about. Okay. Okay. Is this fine? All right. So we are talking about your three types of subcontracting. We went through your domestic, we spoke about your nominated, and then the last one is your selected subcontractor, which is a subcontractor that is selected by the contractor in consultation with the employer in terms of the requirements of the contract. So, an example of this is where you have a project that is being awarded, and let's just say this is a general building project. So you know the GB class of works. When you register with CIDB, you got multiple class of works. You got GB, you got CE, you got ME, and so on. EP. So what happens in some cases when the client puts out the advert? What they look at is in terms of the value of works, which has component has the greatest value. Because if you're going to be doing a building, you're going to have civil works, you're going to have electrical works. All right, so you have multiple classes of works. What the client does is they look at the value itself, whichever is of the highest value, they would then advertise the project in terms of that class of works. But in certain cases, what they would say is we're looking for a GB contractor. However, they would then talk about your selected subcontractor where they actually want maybe your ME class of works as well. And so in that case, when you are tendering, you would actually say that in terms of the ME works itself, which is going to be that subcontractor that's going to be appointed in terms of that. Okay, can we move to the next slide? Okay, your compliance in terms of the statutory requirements. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, so in South Africa itself, so if you look at how laws are actually established, yes.
I would like to know if a main contractor, when he's subcontracting a grade one, if a main contractor is allowed to ask you to buy materials, or as a grade one, is he allowed just to give you to like to ask you to supply labor, only labor?
Okay, so the question was if a main contractor appoints you as a grade one contractor, are they allowed to say that you must only provide labor as a grade one? Okay, so what happens in that case is that is referred to as a labor only subcontracting. Now, what's important is when we spoke about the definition of construction, I said it's a combination of goods and services. So it's a combination of goods and services. So, in terms of being able to upgrade on the CIDB register, you need to be able to provide a track record of the works that you've completed. And when we look at the works completed, what we need to see is that you provided the combination of both your goods and services. So it wouldn't be a case of where you just provided labor only. Now, in terms of subcontracting, they can come to an agreement with you where you can provide services for them within this industry. But just bear in mind when you are upgrading at the CIDB, we need to see a combination of goods and services. So it's providing material and labor. Sorry? Yes? Yeah. Yeah. So I think slightly different. The question posed is what about if it is a development program? In the case where the main contractor is going to provide the materials to support the emerging contractor or subcontractor, and that is part of a developmental program. And I think Richard would also just maybe respond to this one, because that is something that we do actually take into account when it is a development program. So, Richard, maybe if you can just add to that part there in terms of development of contractors.
Right. I believe all of contractors here are registered with CIDB. And for public sector, you see in the private sector environment, and when I'm saying private sector, I'm telling if the project is not for public funds, we discourage, as the CIDB, we discourage subcontracting based on labor only. Because the nature of subcontracting is to provide you as a small contractor an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to know how to run a business, an opportunity to manage the different resources within the project. And therefore, in a public sector environment, we don't allow labor only subcontracting. Therefore, as a subcontractor, he needs to be clear in the subcontracting agreement to say, let's say it's a building of a school, and the school it's a double whatever, it's got 3 layers or 3 levels or 2 levels, and a subcontracting arrangement happens there. All we are trying to say is when we see such a project, even if the subcontractor says or the main contractor says, I will subcontract you for brickwork, at least you will be able to manage those bricks. So within a development phase, we don't expect any client or any public sector client to allow labor only subcontracting, because it defeats the whole purpose of development. Therefore, you might be subcontracted within a development program. And within that program, even though the main contractor procures material for you, remember, the whole point here is he has subcontracted you work. Let's say he says, I'm subcontracting all the brickwork. Now, you don't have money to buy the bricks. That's the first thing. You don't have money to buy cement, sand, and whatever resources that you need to do mortar and all that. Now, the main contractor's responsibility is to show you that the portion of subcontracting, let me put it in a simple example. Let's say the project is 100 million and your subcontracting part is 25 million, meaning that your contract is 25 million, right? Now, within that contract, you don't have money to buy bricks. You don't have money to buy sand and what. The main contractor's responsibility is to buy those bricks for you, to buy all the material that you need, but he's deducting that out of your 25 million. Then in that case, you are able now to say, I have done a subcontracting work of 25 million and I've managed my own resources, because he's buying those bricks on your behalf and you are the one who's now going to manage how those bricks are used on site. And you are managing your own labor and all that. So at the end of the project, you have done a subcontracting of 25 million and you can come to the CIDB for upgrade. Right. Thank you.
Sorry, can you sort out the screen? Huh? Is it on now? Okay, thanks for that, Richard. So we're going to be looking at your statutory compliance. So when you look at the South African law itself, it's established by an act of parliament. And thereafter, once you have the act, you then have something called regulations. Those are basically the rules that are built around the act itself. So if you look at the CIDB has been established by an act of parliament. The act is Act 38 of 2000. And failure to comply with the statutory requirements may result in either fines or penalties being imposed in terms of the failure to actually comply. So in terms of the next slide, please. So, in terms of Chapter 3 of the CIDB, 18.1 states a contractor may not undertake, carry out, complete construction works or a portion thereof for public sector contracts awarded in terms of a competitive tender or quotation unless he or she is registered with the board and holds a valid registration issued by the board. So let's go to that one more time. It's working. Okay, so I'm just going to go through that one more time. So what it says is that you may not undertake any work in the public sector unless you are a registered contractor with the CIDB. And talk about registered, we also have to look at in terms of the status in terms of your registration. It must be active. Okay. If you are suspended, that means you're no longer holding a valid registration. All right. So that is important that you ensure that you maintain your registration with the CIDB. I just want to check, is the screen working now? Is it? Okay. So while they're fixing up the screen on the stage, we can actually move on to the next slide. So it also says, according to the Act itself, subcontracting also you need to ensure that you are registered with the CIDB. So even as a subcontractor, you need to ensure that you are registered with the CIDB. Can we go to the next slide? There's a question.
Good afternoon. My name is Mlamuli Dlamini. I'm from Kambatini municipality. Okay. So, regards to the point of that guy, he just mentioned that if a main contract give you the the job that is a lump sum of 25 million, and then he buys the bricks for you, then you say then deducts from you. So my question is, if I was subcontracted to do a road road maintenance, let me just put it like way. If I was appointed to do a road work, and then I charge less, and then maybe I charge less for the equipment. Equipment, example like excavator and then all those machines. If I charge less, maybe if I charge according to my what we call. Can I please speak with this Zulu so that I can?
Yes, yes.
So that-
Yeah, you're more than welcome to do so.
okay. So la ngicela ukubuza kumhlonishwa akade enze example ngemanje nje ngo 25 million. So mina ke ngikhuluma on my side. I was ngilokhuza ngisabhile kwilokho kwe main contract elungisa umgwaqo la ku District Road D1000 under Mkhambatini municipality. The project is running by Usnothando Constructors. So ngicela ukubuza ukuthi njengoba mina kwathiwa ngenze lo msebenzi bakhipha iadvert ye clearing and grabbing on grade 1, then bekhipha lo advert leyo clearing and grabbing on grade 1, and then they mentioned ukuthi imishini and all these equipment that are required ukuthi ngenze lo msebenzi bazongisupporta ngawo. So akumentionwanga ukuthi ngizochargewa ngalokho. What they did, noma abakusho on their briefing, they say we will support you nge equipment wena ke as u grade 1 because basasithinda nje sibaningi. Wena as u grade 1 you have to we have to quote according to labor rate and the ucharge markup yakho from there. Okay, we did ke nabanye senza ngendlela esenza ngayo. Ngicela ukubuza la ekuthenini manje khona kwenzakalani ke if sebethi bona in this point of umshini nezandla. So when you charge this amount and this amount is less than the amount of machine abayi-charge on per day, but bona bathi bayi-charge from when, but when you quote less than that amount, what happened ke ukuya phambili? Noma ngibuze le ekuthenini uma beyivuma bona i-quotation yakho i-less then i-price yabo wona abathi ingakumele ukuthi ilokhu kumele ucharge yona. Kwenzakalani ke uma sekumele bekukhokhele? Bakukhokhela according to i-quotation lo i-price ile wena, or bakhokha mhlambe on their labor on their labor enhanced into enjalo is. And then ngibuza into ethi ngibuze lo mbuzo ngoba ubaba uke wakhuluma ngokuthi then unikeza u25 million bese main contractor akunikeza ama blocks then bese yakucharge futhi wena for lawa ama blocks akho. So yes, it's an amount. I-grade 1 ngicabanga ukuthi amount yakhona it 500,000. More grade 1 if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
It's a maximum leyo ngithi. So i-minimum ke yalapho it's any amount from umsebenzi onikezwe wona. Angithi? Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So okay, if uke wena ukwazile ukwenza lo nto le i-quotation yakho ungasakhokhelwa according to what we should do for the next step. Okay, noma mhlawumbe ake ngibe kanje. If wena i-labor rate yakho ingaphezulu kwe-labor rate yabo yasemakhaya wena ongahlangene nayo kade wena ukhothe ngokuthi i-labor rate yakho plus ne-markup ihamba kanjani. Uma sebengasayikhokhi ke leyo nto le kumele wenze kanjani? Kumele wenze njani ukuya phambili? Emishinini yabo ke uma sebethi badonsa imali yemishini ekubeni ningavumelananga from ekuqaleni kwenzakalani ukuya phambili? Phela siyingane bakithi singaxhashazwa abantu abadala. Then okunye okugcina lastly,
Okay.
if uke bengasakhokheli ke manje ne-time related yakho as u-director, mina I'm a direct private company, it's a Gijima Logistics. You can check it, go SARS, everywhere, CIDP, you can check it. You see? But it's compliant. So you can't submit, you can't claim with my company, it's compliant, then I get nothing from that. So you can't do that. We are running companies. We need to build our nation. Ezike bengibuza lo mbuzo engibuzayo ingoba nginenkinga la engizodinga ukuthi abahlonishwa abakhona ababhekelele ezama project enzakalayo la ku district ngokunlobo. Sambe sesikhulumile because I've got everything la in my bag. Yibona. That's why ngibuza baba ukuthi uma nje imachine nama blocks akufani. Umshini lo esikavethe ama blocks akufani baba. And then the amount oyenze ngayo example like ayifani yabo lonto. So angikholwa ukuthi makuthiwa sisebenza ngemishini le yokusebenza emgaqweni akufani noma wakhe indlu kunomehluko. If kodwa kuukuthi impendulo ingaba khona manje cha ngicane ngiphendule kodwa mawukuthi kudinga ukuthi lapha ngisondele mina kulaba ababhekelela inkinga enjengana athe ngakho njengoba singakhokhelwa nje ngizosondela phela kunenkinga. Ngibonga ithuba.
Okay, thank you. All right. Richard has been preparing a response through that sermon, but thanks a lot for that. And let's hope we can address that.
Ngiyabonga for a question, Baba. Yeah, I hear your concerns. Guti, yeah, Guti, when let me explain kanje. for a road construction, because when you are in road construction, le calling was calling for a labor only subcontract. Now, labor only subcontract, shugo to where now you must now uyoqasha abantu, because they need to, you are providing in labor, you are providing abantu. Then, but ufake a markup, but when I need to run a company. So i-company yakho inama overheads, angithi in the office. I-company yakho kufanele ibhadale uSARS. Angithi. So le office ina telephone, angithi. Ina rent, ina electricity, angithi. Ilama overheads lawo. Then iphinde ibe wena as a director. Ibe ne-secretary khona umuntu lo uphendula amafoni ungekho, angithi. Wonke lokho becomes ama-overheads wakho. Then uma le uprepare le labor rate yakho, you have to look at yonke lento lesikhulume ngayo sithi ama-overheads. Bese uya ku le section, angithi mhlambe bayasebenza, angithi umgwaqo uyahamba ngithi. So kule section to section, enye section uthola ukuthi i-labor rate yakhona u-50 rand ngelanga. Abanye basebenza ngama-task, but no, bazosebenza nge-50 rand per task. Sure, wena mawubanikeza i-task, let's say for today, i-program yakho ime kanje uthi you are going to excavate almost about 100 meters. And 100 meters could be about 200 square meters. Right? Ngiyabhekisa nje. So meaning that per square meter, wena fanele wazi ukuthi okay, uma ngigubha for per square meter, how much am I charging lo muntu? Considering leyo i-labor rate yalapho. And when the project moves, i-labor rate ingachinja on the other side, because now you are going into another ward. But i-labor rate akusi 50 rand la, i-labor rate is 70 rand. So you have to now effect yonke lento le. So when you give a code, then it is inclusive kuyonke lento lesikhulume ngayo. Right? Now, these people bathi kuwe wena uprovide labor rate, bathi no sizokunceda ngemishini. Basho njalo ukuthi bazokunceda ngemishini because wena uba-charge per square meter or per cubic meter, ngithi. So the only thing bayenzayo ukuthi you don't have to wena uyoqasha imishini yakho ngoba imishini ikhona. But imishini, whether it's a TLB or it's a grader, anything, or a bulldozer, whatever they buy 7 side, in a price yayo ithengiwe. Angithi. Iya renta. Some of the machines are renta per hour. Some of the machines are renta per day. So those people uma bathi no, we have deducted imali ye machine, it's based on your production for that day. That's why I'm saying if you have done 100 meters, which comes to about 200 square meters or 200 cubic meters, then you must calculate per cubic meter how much that machine has charged. And that's how you then start managing your contract. But okunye sizokhuluma uma ungasondela na i-office lethu lapha. Yeah, sisondele sikhuluma. And then uzokwazi ukuthi uyabona. Right. Yeah, so guys, injalo, when we say labor only contract, and that is why we don't support it. Because we don't support it because it does not help you with anything. Ayukusizi a labor only contract. You need to know how much is your contract amount for everything. And therefore, if that person and say, and again, say example ngama bricks, it still applies Guma machines. Because this person is only hiring a machine on your behalf. And as a main contractor, he must tell you, this machine is renting per hour. and is charging us so much per hour. So that way, now when you then say, I need this machine on site, you need to calculate how many hours are you going to use that machine, and after you use it, it must go away. Because as you keep it on site, it's renting. Ukhumbule. Whether uyayisebenzisa or awuyisebenzisi, yona umshini uyarenta. Imali iyahamba. So to manage a contract, you need to understand what is your production for that day, and what are you going to do for that day, and what is your target for that day, to be able to manage your contract. Yeah, I think I've tried to cover.
Okay, thanks a lot, Richard. All right, so I see there's another hand there, Richard. I think we'll allow for one more question before we move on.
Sanibona, igama nguthandiwe Ngcobo. I'm from Mafatini, phansi kwevundlela. Bengicela ukubuza, ngiyayizwa i-presentation yonke, but kumina isazwakala as sekuyabantu abasebenzayo already abasebenzayo. Mina ngino grade 1 ka-CIBD, which was registered in 2023. Angikakaze ngithole umsebenzi. Okanye nina niwu-CIDB, ikuphi usizo eninalo kuthina abantu ama-new registered, ukuze nami ngikwazi ukuthi ngisabhe noma ngithola umsebenzi, kukuphi lapho ngizothola khona usizo lokuqala, i-step sala ngimele ngiye khona as umuntu nje omusha. Ngiyabonga.
Ngiyabonga. Thank you, Uthi umama registered from 2023, and since now akakatholi lutho. Mina, first thing I would ask Uthi, we are registering no CIDB ngoba sifuna ukuqala ibhizinisi. Angithi? And ibhizinisi iranwa umnikazi wayo. Angithi? Then when njengomnikazi, it's upon you then to now say, now I've registered, where can I find opportunities? Now, because you are registered, uhlala la eMgungundlovu, the first point of call ukuthi iMgungundlovu ingakusiza ngani? Wena, what can you provide as service kuMgungundlovu? Because you are now registered ku GB. Angithi? And as you are registered with GB, we ask you to go there's a school that does not have a maintenance. So you go to that mnyango where department and say, I can provide this service and maintain that school. That's a business mind, Leo. It's an entrepreneurship, because as a business person, you need to see things that a normal person cannot see. As a business person, you need to be able to identify opportunities. I umele ukuthi itender izophuma. Yabona? That's where you start. And that's how the opportunities are. And the next thing is you go to that municipality OT. Where is the local economic department of this municipality? And you register with them and say, I am so and so construction, these are my services. So that when that municipality now goes out on tender, because currently now we are going to make it law, no tender must go out without subcontracting. It must be law, and it's going to be law. So that, and we are now even providing more, because now once you register with that municipality as a grade 1, we have said in the Procurement Act that the president have signed already. Already it's law. That each and every municipality must then do set asides. When we say set asides, CET, umgungundlovu, fanele bathatha policy bathi, all umsebenzi wephansi kwe-1 million will be set aside for grade 1. Uyayibona? Then grade 1, if you are registered in that, you are able now to say, now I can get opportunities. So that's what we are now empowering. That's what the Act is empowering. And that's why we are here to show you that there are opportunities. And it doesn't end there, because the municipality can also adopt a policy to say any project that is below, let's say, let me put a figure, below 50 million, that project must be done by local contractors. Then you now control, Guti, a person lo ubuya from Gauteng cannot come and take opportunities that you are there for. So those are some of the things that we are bringing as set-asides to make sure that there is equal opportunities for youth, women, and lababakulile. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I think ngizokhuluma ngesiZulu is fine. Ngizoyisummarize nge-English. Maybe inkinga la enkulu is mhlambe singayisho ukuthi when you go to the CIDB tender vault, I will call it a tender vault, where companies, municipalities are supposed to advertise. There are no grade 1 jobs. Zero. Aweko. Then the question is, why must you register as grade 1? That's the question. Because there's nothing there. Ubonu grade 7, 8, 4, 5, and 6. So why must we have grade 1? I think, Richard, we need to answer that question in terms of the law to say, even those contractors who are supposed to comply with the law to subcontract grade 1s and 2s, shouldn't then they also post those things into the CIDB advert kind of a portal so that contractors, because we need to teach people where to get work. If you say you must go to the municipality, go masipala, what happens? Ingane zobane ithole izinto. Now, what is important for us as government is to say that, first of all, if there's work that needs to be done, it must be advertised, first of all, in the CITP portal. Whether it's Transnet, the municipality, any company, it must be on the CITP portal so that everybody has got an equal opportunity. If it's not advertised, it's irregular on the CITP. In other words, someone is breaking the law somewhere there. So that we stop this thing of creating izindozobani when there's a government that has got a legislation. In fact, we are busy pushing to say, as we review this procurement legislation, we must enforce the CITP Act to its full capacity. And in that way, we'll be able then to actually assist and say, when there's a grade 1 opportunity, the contractors go to one website. Because the problem that I'm having with people going to multiple websites, it becomes a problem. There's a thing called e-tenders. You can go now live, because I've just checked it now, and look for a grade 1 job. There's zero. Nothing. So lo mama mayibuza ethi ngishona phi? I think CITP must be the answer. And we must make sure that as we converge and maybe finalize these master classes, we answer, because that's where it starts. That's why I'm also sitting here, because this is where the problems start. Especially people get to be told, hey, you must know so and so. And then they go, they pay money, and then they do things that are not supposed to be done just because they want to get work. It should not be like that. If a person has gone to the level of opening a grade one contractor to the extent of compliance like landlord issue, things must happen quickly. When it goes to the website, you must see and sort of get the work there. Because at the end of the day, we can't create an institution that is supposed to look after contractors and then tell contractors to go back to the people who have not been giving them work in the first place. So I think let's try to look at that if it's possible, Richard. I don't know to what extent, but I think the voice is clear. Grade ones and two, they don't have work. The bigger players have got their own contractors. In fact, to be honest, the big grades, what they do, instead of inviting these people I'm talking about, that they don't know, they ask their friends and relatives to open grade one so that they subcontract them, which then defeats you as well. So maybe there must be a way. I think the minister was clear to say localization is local. That's basically what it means. So you can't expect someone, as an example, at the level of a grade one, even a general work or something like that, coming from Joburg to do work within this district, who's a grade one, for instance, or grade two, but they are there because people plan things. So maybe let's try to, as we deal with this one, because these are grade ones, these are people that needs to be, bafana nengane, basagaqa, badlubisi, they need that. I understand the training, but the important part is getting work. Let them fail when they've got work already given to them through the legislation by us enforcing that all government institutions, they must advertise, even no matter how small, it must be on that website page, CITP, notwithstanding that there's a thing called e-tenders. Thank you. Chad.
Okay. Richard, are you going to respond or are you going to take the comments? Okay.
When it comes from UTG, it's an instruction. And I welcome the instruction. And we will make sure that we have one portal that you can go through. But even though there is that, we are coming with the minister this morning mentioned National Contractor Development Framework. Now that framework, we are now incorporating it as part of the CIDB regulation, meaning when I said go and register with that municipality, I'm saying all municipalities will have a contractor development program. And that program will be based on CIDB standards, meaning that in that program, we have outlined from grade one, what does he need to know and understand so that you grow and the program is covering contractors from grade one up to grade 6. That's where I'm saying the set-asides will happen. Now, if you are now in that program, you will then be able to be in that program for 3 years. Protected environment, meaning that you only compete with the people who are with you in the program. And when you exit the program in 3 years, you entered as a grade 1, you will exit the program being a grade 6. So those are the things that we are initiating are coming. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, DG, and thanks, Richard. Okay, coming back to the presentation, we are looking at the regulatory requirements. If you can just go back to the slides, and we can move to the next slide. So in terms of the regulatory requirements, so your construction business is not permitted by law to actually contract with any client if you are not in good standing in terms of the compensation fund or the licensed compensation insurer that is within the building industry. The other thing is, one of the things that you need to ensure that you also comply with is that you meet the necessary competencies and resources that are required for you to carry out the work safely. So that is important to just take notice of. Another thing is, if you are going to be doing home building, you need to ensure that you are registered with the National Home Builders Registration Council, your NHBRC. And then the other area that you have to be compliant is in terms of SARS. So here again, you need to always produce that tax clearance certificate. So those are just some of the areas that you need to ensure that you do comply with. Can we go to the next slide? Other areas that you have to comply, as I mentioned, SARS. So within SARS, there's a number of areas, things like VAT, unless you are VAT exempt. You need to ensure that you do pay income taxes, employee taxes. And then with your Department of Employment and Labor, one of the areas that you need to comply is your unemployment insurance fund, or your UIF. So you need to make sure that those contributions are actually made. And then another area is National Treasury. Here again, you need to be registered on what we refer to as a CSD, which is your Central Supplier Database. So I know it's a whole lot of regulatory requirements, but these are some of the things that you do need to be able to comply with to ensure that you can actually do work in the public sector. Can we go to the next slide? So now we're going to look at when it comes to tendering in the public sector, and this is where you're going to be looking for work. What do you need to actually do to find work opportunities? Now, I think DG also just highlighted the importance of actually ensuring that we have grade 1 projects that are also advertised in grade 2 projects. So it allows you to actually be able to apply for those projects. So some of the areas that you can be looking for work would be through your tender bulletins, your newspapers, through the CIDB iTender services, which you will find on our website. And then also you need to go and visit your local municipalities. They normally do have your tender boards, and on your tender boards, you would then find that they would actually have work that would be advertised that may fall, especially within your grade and class of works. So these are some of the avenues that you can look at. And then also what's important is that you need to always talk to people that are in the construction industry. So where you see that there is some sort of construction work that's taking place, maybe you can step over there, have a chat with the construction manager and see in terms of work availability, is there anything that they actually are able to subcontract to you? And then you can get into those negotiations. So you need to also make sure you put yourself out there to try and get work, either through, as I mentioned, the tender process itself or request for quotations, or you can also look at your subcontracting possibilities. I just want to give DJ an opportunity to also comment.
Yeah. Maybe what I want to also, maybe it's not an instruction, maybe it's something that we need to consider. These are small contractors, 1 and 2. You are saying they must register with CIDP, they pay 450. All right? You say they must also register with NHRPRC, which they must write an exam, but they are not trained. So they must get someone who's a builder, PR building inspector from SACPCMP to write the exam on their behalf, and they get the certificate so that they can get work, whether to build a small bridge or a clinic or something like that. So all that I'm saying is that I just spoken to Richard. As you see me, I was whispering to him. The George building in the Western Cape, where 34 people or more died. The contractor was not registered with CITP, but with NHRPRC. So I'm saying, as government, let's eliminate red tape. Let's have one CITP managing and regulating the construction industry. We do appreciate that you've given NHRPRC as an exemption to do what they are doing, but from where I'm seated, I think somewhere along the way, we need to manage that thing so that if CITP is a regulator for all construction building, now with NHRPRC on the other hand, collecting whatever that they are collecting, because constructing a house is construction, by the way. It is construction. But I think it ends up having NHRPRC getting into your mandate that you are supposed to control. Now they also do, as long as they say it's accommodation, they also do high-rise buildings, like the one in George. And you know what happened? I was with the CEO of CIDP there. I couldn't see NHRPRC. I was with the minister, Zigalala. I was with EXA, our professionals. They were not there because theirs is to collect rates. Obviously, they're supposed to inspect, you know. But I'm trying to say maybe as part of this training as we move with these things, let's also enforce the legislation so the contractors don't have a burden of double dipping. If a contractor must register with CIDP, it must end there. Because for you to register with CIDP, one, you must comply with SARS. That's the first part. You must be on the CSD, for lack of a better word. So you can't just be in CIDP without complying with all those things. But my worry is the one of NHRPRC, which is a burden. That's where they actually get more of their work as an initial. So maybe you're thinking, Richard, in terms of incorporating NHRPRC into a program stroke review of sort. It will help a great deal because that's where problems come. These contractors who are NHRPRC registered are mainly white contractors who've got so much work and they don't know these people who are seated here. And they didn't need to be registered with CITP, but they work for their friends. You see a spa being built elsewhere here, Pietermaritzburg, Waku Spa. There's no CITP requirement. We are busy now. We've changed the legislation to say every contractor in this country shall be CITP. If it's not CITP, whether it's private sector or not, it shouldn't matter. So that at least we actually kill this red tape. That's what I wanted to emphasize, so that at least we manage this thing going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, DG, for that. So in terms of, what DG was actually just saying, that the construction industry is a construction industry, whether it's private or public, and it should be regulated all the same. Can we go onto the presentation screen, please? Thanks. Can we go to the next slide? To invite for quotations. So those of you that had opportunities to actually apply for quotations, whether it was with your local municipality, you'd find that the way in which these documents are actually structured and how it's awarded or advertised, there has to be a structured manner in which that takes place. So construction businesses are required to submit a tender offer or a form of offer and acceptance whenever your quotations or your tenders are called for, and written contracts are then entered into between you and the client. So what would happen is, you see the advert, you would then have to respond to the advert, and you need to ensure that you comply with all of the requirements of that advert itself. And that's what I'm going to be going into. So we can move on to the next slide. So when you look at your private and public sector tenders and quotations, so tenders are invited in terms of what we refer to as a standard form of contract. So what it gives you is the scope of work. So what does a client actually require you to do? What is the goods and services that you have to provide? And then we look at the form of tender and the state of conditions of that tender. So these are how it is then managed in terms of the process. Now, what would happen is, when you do get the tender document, you read through, see what is required. You need to ensure that, is it something that you can actually provide in terms of that service? Some cases, the information that is provided might not be sufficient. And so what would happen is, you may have the brief scope of work in the case of your quotations, and you get an opportunity to also have a briefing session where you can actually ask questions to get clarity, so you have a better understanding as well. So what DG was also saying is the first and most important thing is you must be able to access work itself. And in order to be able to access that work, you must be able to submit or respond to your tenders or your request for quotations in a manner that ensures that your submission will actually be evaluated, and then you have an opportunity of actually getting that job or project. Can we move on to the next slide? So when you look at a notice or invitation to tender, so what you'd find on that first page of the document, and this is important, the first part of it is going to be what is the reference number, what is the title of the contract, and then we look at a brief description of what are the services that is required in terms of your engineering or construction works. You need to look at what is the closing date. Do you have sufficient time to actually respond to this RFQ or this tender? Where and when is there going to be taking, where and when will we have a clarification meeting where you can get more information in terms of the project itself? And also you need to find out if you have to actually collect the document, what is the process there, the time and the place for actually collecting those procurement documents. In most cases, you can also download those documents, and so you can get access to them. Can we move to the next slide? Okay, so Richard was actually pointing out that we are actually running out of time. So we can just go on to the next slide, please. I'm going to be wrapping up here. And I think one of the things to highlight is that when we started the session, I mentioned this is an extract from the contractor management guidelines. It is a document on the CIDB website. And as I mentioned, there's many parts to it. It's actually a 3-part publication. So some of the areas that we'll be talking about in those publications is how do you actually work out your pricing? So when you're doing your BOQ, what you need to look out in terms of your BOQ and how you actually go about pricing that BOQ. How do you manage things like your finances? How do you manage your cash flow? So some of those areas that you can then maybe at a later stage refer to, you can download those documents and have a read through it. But also, as the Deputy Minister did mention, we're going to be having a few more follow-up sessions. What CIDB is going to be providing through the BURG program is we run an assessment firstly to understand what are your needs, your developmental needs itself. And then post that, what we also do is we provide that developmental training to cover all of the gaps that we've identified. So that's how we can further support you as contractors to develop in this industry. Richard, if there's anything else that you would like to add? So we're just going to get some closing remarks from Richard. And as I mentioned, that the slides to this presentation will be provided as well. So if you signed the register and if you provided an email address, we can make that available to you.
Thanks. I think, being a contractor is not easy. And we have to acknowledge that for you to take that first step to become a contractor, it's a good step because we are going to need your services in future. But as we are saying, as the CIDB, we've got a number of programs that we are running. And I hope all of you have seen the adverts. And also you are going to make sure that you participate on those programs. We are currently running a program under the BUILD program where we are funding imali iphuma ku-CIDB so that you can come ku-CIDB and we can assess you. What do you know about business? How far do you know? What are the principles of construction industry? So that we can be able to structure a training program dedicated to you so that we build your company. We are running that program currently. Please visit any of our CIDB offices for that information in terms of how you then come into that program. Other than other programs, we are also making sure that we acknowledge that kuna clients amanye, but they are trying to get rid of contractors by introducing what we call they say, give us a guarantee. Angit? Give us a guarantee. We can give you a job, but we want a guarantee of so many millions. We are looking into those programs, but as a CIDB, we have also set up a fund that is dedicated to help you in such situations where you can apply for that fund and then you can be able to pay a guarantee on a project. So that access to fund is there, it's available. Already it's set up. We are now 2 or 3 years in that fund, collecting those funds. So yeah, in closing, I'm saying that this is one of the sessions, but we will have more sessions. The minister has already given us instruction to say that we need to have another session which will be online. Our KZN office will then communicate that information. We have all your details through registration and everyone will be invited to that online session. If those that cannot access internet, then they can be able, we can have a virtual session where our KZN office will then prepare a hall or something that will be able for you guys to access that kind of training. With that, Giabonga, thank you.
Okay, thanks, ladies and gentlemen. So that brings to an end this session. I think what we can also do is, if you have time, there's many stalls that are available where there's a lot of information that can be provided to support and assist you. I understand that we're going to be breaking for lunch thereafter, which is on my extreme left-hand side, if you can maybe proceed through. And just remember that the last sessions or the final session for this afternoon is going to be talking about opportunities for yourselves. So please ensure that you do get back here after lunch. Thanks a lot.
You wait.